Right. Good day, everyone. I'm Pam Rakansky. I am the facilitator for our YS education program here at the YMCA in Northbrook. I also work in the pool and I just came out of it, so my head's a little wet. It's my pleasure today to introduce a great talk, Prevention Across the Ages. Erin Tegge is from the Glenview Northbrook Coalition for Youth and will be speaking to us about how to talk to our kids at all ages about tough topics. So join the Glenview Northbrook Coalition for Youth in a conversation of understanding how to talk with kids at all stages of development about tough topics, specifically drugs and alcohol. We will be recording today's session and make it available as a podcast. So if you're a Y member or part of the public, you're able to view it at a time later on our podcast library, which is found on our YES website within the North Suburban YMCA. This program will last about an hour. If you have any questions, we ask you to kind of keep them to the end for a question session. But if there's any burning questions, feel free to put in the chat box and I'll make sure that Erin sees that during our talk. We're free and open to the public, so you can find more information to us online. And with that, I'd like to welcome Erin Tegge to speak to us today. Thank you for joining us. Prevention Across the Ages.
Thank you. I do have a presentation PowerPoint, so I'm going to share my screen and get that going, and then we will jump right into this really important topic. So like Pam said, my name is Erin Tegge. I'm with Glenview Northbrook Coalition for Youth. I also work for Peer Services. We are a nonprofit substance use prevention organization. And so while today's topic is prevention in general, regarding just risk-taking behaviors among our youth, I definitely tend to focus a little more on drugs and alcohol because that is my specialty. So I'm going to do a really brief introduction to who and what GNCY does in the community, talk very briefly about kind of the basics of prevention, what prevention is, why it's important, kind of how we can support our youth through those various aspects of prevention. And then we're going to get into the meat of the topic, going through 5 different developmental stages of our kids. We're going to go through preschool years, early elementary, late elementary and middle school, high school, and then young adulthood. And we're going to talk through how those developmental stages kind of impact how we communicate, how our relationships are with those kids at those different stages, talk through some common scenarios of tough topics that us as parents, caregivers, trusted adults, whatever our role is, some common scenarios that we may face with youth at those different stages, and then really provide some helpful tips on how to engage in these conversations with some of these tough topics. So GNCY, Glenview Northbrook Coalition for Youth, we are a drug-free community coalition that's been in the Glenview Northbrook community since about 2012. Oh, I guess that's 10 years. Wow, didn't even realize that. We do have a federal grant that allows us to do all of the work, important work that we do within Glenview and Northbrook. And our mission is really to empower our youth to live safe drug and alcohol-free lives. We collaborate with many, many different community members, including the Y, the schools, the libraries, lots and lots of different folks to really support our youth in substance use prevention, specifically reducing that youth alcohol, marijuana, and tobacco misuse among our youth. So jumping right into prevention, and you know, I assume those of you who are on this call are likely parents or caregivers or important adults in some kid's life. And I want to start off right off the bat to let you know that parents are one of the #1 influences on their kids at all of these different stages. Sometimes as a parent, it doesn't always feel like you are, but research shows over and over and over again that parents are the #1 influence. And I think that is such an important piece of information for parents to remember, because day to day, a lot of times you might not feel like that's the case. However, it is true. And thank you for being on this webinar to hopefully learn some information on how you can support and have conversations with your kids on a variety of tough topics. So when we're talking about prevention, obviously there's lots and lots of different types of prevention out there in the world. And our focus is really preventing those substance use issues or substance use with our youth, as well as preventing mental health issues. We know that mental health and substance use are very much linked together. And so it's really hard to talk about substance use without mental health and vice versa. So our focus really is to support our youth and increasing what we call protective factors, all while mitigating, outweighing, overcoming whatever risk factors. When we're looking at mental health and substance use, we see consistency among risk factors that increase the likelihood of a child, a youth, engaging in substance use or having potential mental health concerns or issues. Some of those that we see are ineffective parenting, lack of attachment with parenting, chaotic home environment, academic failure, poor social skills, poor coping skills, association with peers with problem behaviors, etc. This is not an exhaustive list. There are many more, but these are just some of the key risk factors that we see in youth who may experience substance use or mental health concerns. However, pretty much for every risk factor, there is a corresponding protective factor. And that is really what we are focusing on to really enhance, improve, put out there all of these wonderful protective factors so that we can support our youth. Some of those protective factors: parental involvement, supportive parents, strong bond with the child and their families, whatever that family may look like to them, parental monitoring, setting clear limits and expectations, academic success, involvement in extracurricular activities, strong community bonds. So are there places in the community that are supportive of our youth that they feel cared for and can go to? That good mental, physical, spiritual, emotional health, all of those things are protective factors. So since we are talking about kind of keeping things in the family right now, we're really going to focus on those kind of home family protective factors throughout the rest of our time together. Because the hard part with risk and protective factors, we can't control all of them. So we are going to focus on the ones that we can control. And again, it's those that are in the home, in our families, so we can really support our youth. So when we think about youth, and I know I'm talking a lot right now, I usually talk about high schoolers and middle schoolers, so keeping in mind those younger ones too. When we have kids in our lives, teens, however old they are, we know all kids engage in a variety of behaviors, a variety of risk-taking behaviors. And research shows over and over how those risk-taking behaviors a lot of times have pretty consistent motivations. There's reasons why kids might, ride a skateboard down a big skate ramp or try alcohol or whatever that risk-taking behavior might be. Try it for the school play. There's positive risks as well. And some of these motivations are really important for us to keep in mind as we're thinking about this topic, because our job as a parent or caring adult is to help our kids find healthy ways to meet those needs, to meet those motivations. So if our kids are bored or curious, or they're trying to ignore their troubles, or if there are some mental health concerns, if they want to feel grown up, be independent, feel like they belong somewhere, there are healthy ways that they can go about doing all of those things and not engage in some of the negative risk-taking behavior, whether it be substance use or sexual promiscuity or whatever the case may be, whatever that risk-taking is. And so we want to make sure we're keeping all of those motivations in mind as we're thinking about having these conversations with our kids. So as we kind of structure going through all the developmental stages, we're going to talk about these 5 different stages. And for each one, like I shared at the beginning, we're going to go over some brain development, specifically some social, emotional, cognitive functioning, so we can understand how their brains are working at that stage, because that is very much going to impact how we talk to them and what we do. How do our kids engage with the world? When do they experience or are exposed to different substances, different potential risk-taking behaviors? And then how can you talk to them about these tough topics? What you can say, what language you can use, etc. So for each of these developmental stages, we will cover all of those 3 aspects on the right. So we are going to get started with really, really basics on understanding brain development. I'm sure many of you have heard all of this before, but it's a really important part of what we're talking about. So we want to make sure we're all on the same page. Our brains continue to develop until the mid-20s. And so that is a long time that our brains are not fully developed, and that absolutely can impact thoughts, behaviors, decisions, etc. with our kids. And the way that the brain develops, it develops from bottom to top, back to front. And that's really important because, as you can see in kind of the diagram here, there are many different parts of the brain that have really specific functions. And the parts of the brain that are in the bottom and the back, kind of the first ones to develop, are the ones that we need for survival. Are the part of the brain that tells us how to breathe, that makes sure our heart is beating, that's regulating our temperature. All of those necessary survival aspects, those are there at birth, thank goodness. And some of the higher level, more complex development occurs much later. And the last part of the brain to develop is that prefrontal cortex, which is right behind your forehead. And that part of the brain is so important in decision-making, judgment, impulse control, weighing those risks, all of those things that doesn't fully develop until around age 25. So all of our kids, as they're growing up into young adulthood, that part of the brain is not fully developed and is not fully functioning at all of its capacity because it hasn't fully grown yet. And as we think about the conversations, the words, the language that we use, and maybe giving some insight into why our kids at varying ages are acting the way that they are, that piece is really important. So when our 6-year-old appears to not be making good decisions, it's not because they don't want to, it's because they really can't, depending what the situation is. And so our job as a parent, caregiver, important adult is to really make sure we are supporting our kids at the various stages of development, and practice and strengthen all of those really important skills so that their brain can fully develop in the best way possible. So starting out with our youngest ones, our preschoolers. And a lot of times, since I am very specifically in that substance use field, people are like, oh my gosh, how on earth do you talk to a preschooler? Why would you be talking to a preschooler about substances? But it's really important. With our preschoolers, there's a lot happening at that age. Lots and lots of growth and development in their brain. Some of the things that we are starting to see at this preschool age, their memory, they can actually remember things, which is really important. They're starting to understand categories and how different groups of things exist in the world. They use a lot of self-talk to kind of work their way through the day. A lot of us might have an internal dialogue when we're working through stuff, we're doing things or going throughout our day. Preschoolers don't have that yet. They say it all out loud. So you can hear them process what's going on in their environment and in their world. And we start to see problem solving. They start to learn what that is, how to do that. By no means are they experts at it yet, but this is where we're really starting to see that. They tend to use routines and repetition to understand their world. I mean, if you've ever walked into a preschool classroom, I mean, it's you walk in, you go to your cubby, you get, you hang up your backpack. I mean, it's very structured because that routine and repetition really helps create those brain connections so that they can start to learn and understand what's going on around them. These last two are pretty important for our preschoolers. They are very egocentric. Although I would say egocentricity is a common theme throughout many of these different stages. But they only see things for themselves. They only, they think how they think is how everybody thinks. They're very much focused on what they think, what they know, what they feel, and cannot at this point really translate into understanding how other people might think and feel, and that might be different than them. They also very much view their world, and it's all very much based on their own perception versus reasoning. So if they think something to be true, their perception, then it must be true. The common kind of traditional psychology example, if you take 5 pennies and lay them in a row close together, and then you take those same 5 pennies and spread them apart, even though there's the same amount of pennies, they will think that spread apart line of pennies has more pennies because it's longer, even though there's the same amount. So it's very much based on their perception versus some of that higher level thinking that we see develop a little bit later on. So as we think about what we want to do for our preschoolers, and kind of our goal for prevention at this stage is to really lay the foundation for healthy habits. So all of the things that we are working on are helping them learn how to make decisions, helping them to learn and understand their emotions, helping them to learn and understand and have good friendship relationships and, social relationships, all of those really key foundational skills, so that they can continue to develop those as they get older and have those kind of really well-established healthy habits. So at the preschool year, that really is our focus. So some scenarios that you might face with a preschooler, whether it's substance related or not, these examples all happen to be substance related. So I'm going to really quickly go through these different scenarios and some potential responses that one might have kind of based on their current developmental stage. So we'll start with this first one, the top left box, the taking your daily vitamin or giving your child their daily vitamin. Oftentimes, vitamins in medicine is the first experience that a child has related to a substance. Yes, whether it's a vitamin or maybe they had to take medicine for a cold or allergies or a sore throat, whatever the case may be. This is often kind of the first opportunity that us as parents have to engage in these conversations. So how you might talk to a preschooler about taking a vitamin, you might say something like, vitamins help your body grow. You need to take them every day so you can grow up and be big and strong. But only making sure that you take what's given to you. With someone else's vitamins, maybe too much or might hurt you and make you sick. So while you're acknowledging the benefits of these vitamins, you're also incorporating and talking about kind of the safety aspect of medication. The next one, kids are curious about medicine bottles that they see in your home. And again, you only take that medicine if you're sick and only if your parent or doctor gives it to you. Making sure they understand that adult figure is the one to give them or administer that medicine. Taking your medicine by yourself, taking the wrong medicine, or taking medicine that isn't especially for you could be unsafe. Talking in language like this is something that they understand. They likely understand who their doctor is, who their parent or guardian is. At this point, they typically understand what it means to be unsafe. So using all of these types of words and language to help them understand what is going on in their world around them. Next one, the bottom left. So your child sees an adult smoking or vaping, and you've talked about these dangers before, and so they're really confused. Like, you told me these are bad, but yet some people are doing these. And so you can share with them about how grown-ups make their own decisions, and sometimes those decisions aren't the healthiest choice for their bodies. And then if you want to take it a step further, going into kind of what addiction is. When someone starts smoking, their body feels like it has to have those cigarettes or tobacco, and it makes it harder for them to stop. And that's why it's so important to not even try smoking or vaping. So you're kind of layering in bits and pieces of information about those different substances, acknowledging the decision-making aspect of those grown-ups, talking about healthy choices for our bodies. Again, we're laying that foundation for healthy habits. And the last one, your child sees you drinking alcohol and wonders if you can have it. No, you could just stop there. Or continue on and saying, no, alcohol is something only for adults. It's not safe for kids because your brain and body are still growing and it can make you sick. And that is one that actually I have used. I do have 3 kids. My oldest is 8. And when she was in preschool, she asked me that very question. She's like, hey, what is that? Why are you drinking it? And can I have it? And luckily, when she was in preschool, she had just been learning about the brain and the body, which was awesome. And she learned that her brain is the boss of her body. So I knew that she had that language, that her brain is the boss of her body. And so I was able to use that language that she already knew to talk about how alcohol is not safe for kids, and was able to kind of make that connection to something that she already knew. And kind of go from there. So even though people don't think, oh my gosh, why should you talk about substances or difficult topics or difficult scenarios with preschoolers? Well, guess what? They live in the world and encounter these things. And so it's really important to be able to talk about them and address them. Because as we know, if you have older kids, it can get harder and harder as they grow older. And so being able to talk about these topics is so important this early on. So when things do get harder, they're much more likely to come and talk to you and have an open conversation with you. So just tips to keep in mind when you're talking with your preschooler. We still want to make sure that our answers to their questions and our conversations are short and simple. Again, their brains cannot handle super abstract, complex concepts. And so we want to make sure we're being really straight and to the point and keeping it short and simple. I kind of already touched on this in my last example, but using that language and concepts that they understand, but it's really important to still name the substances or the topic, whatever that topic might be, with their real actual names. I have heard other parents of young kids talk about how, oh, well, we don't call it alcohol, we call it, oh, that's mommy's juice. And we want to be really, really careful with that because, again, our preschoolers live in their own world, live in their own perception. And so if they hear, oh, that's mommy's juice, oh, I like juice. Juice is something that's yummy and good. So that must also be yummy and good too. So making sure, even though you think, oh my gosh, how can I say alcohol or wine or whatever the topic is, body parts, etc. We want to make sure we're actually using their names to start having them learn that vocabulary so that they don't think it's something else. And again, we really want to focus on them taking care of their bodies, being healthy, playing, sleeping, encouraging those decision-making skills. Our preschoolers can make lots of decisions throughout their day. And so as many opportunities as we can to allow them to practice making decisions is going to be really helpful when those decisions in life get much more difficult versus I want, to watch Paw Patrol versus Sophia the First. But whenever we can, whenever possible, whether it's what snack they want, what cup they want, what cartoon they want, what to wear, weather permitting, we want to make sure we're allowing them to practice making decisions. It's a really good skill for them to obviously use. And we do want to look at those everyday situations as learning opportunities for developing those problem-solving skills or managing those emotions. Maybe their younger brother messed up the tower that they were building. And so really using those everyday situations to help them with those key foundational skills is really important at that preschool level. So moving on to our early elementary. So these are, we're thinking kindergarten, first grade, second grade, even into third grade, is those early elementary kids. So we start to definitely see a shift in how they think and how they view the world and how their brain kind of handles what's going on around them. They are starting to understand logic, reasoning, other people's perspective, other people's point of view. While they still tend to be fairly egocentric, they do start to understand how the world around them can impact them. It's a slow process, but they eventually get there. And they start to see and think through problems in a much more creative or broader way, looking at multiple different options, multiple different solutions, multiple different consequences, etc. And so that thinking, that problem solving is much more complex. They have increased attention span, they can plan ahead a lot better. And what's happening actually inside their brain is information in the brain actually is starting to travel much faster, and different parts of the brain are starting to connect and work more in coordination. So those parts aren't just necessarily focused individually. The brain is starting to work much better as a whole at this point. And so when we think about our early elementary kiddos, we want to continue to talk about those healthy habits that we have been talking about, but we're also allowing them and understand that they're starting to have a lot more independence, a lot more individuality. At this point, because their brains are able to handle a lot more complex aspects, we really start to talk about the why with risk-taking behaviors, why things are unhealthy, why things are unsafe. With a 3-year-old, you're going to say, no, you can't jump off the top of your bunk bed because it's unsafe. And you could break your arm, keeping it pretty short and simple. But with early elementary, they're starting to understand like, oh, if I fall off the top bunk, I, could hit the ground, break my arm. There's a lot more complexity and different aspects, which you can bring into your conversations with them and helping them understand that why, and helping them understand why e-cigarettes are bad or why they shouldn't, I don't know, do other things that are risky. So some scenarios for early elementary kids. Start with the top left. Your child has experienced curiosity about pills you take every day and other bottles in the medicine cabinet. Similar situation that we saw with a preschooler, but the response is going to be slightly different. A potential response, just because it's in a family medicine cabinet doesn't mean that it's safe for you to take. Even if your friends say it's okay, you can say, no, my parents won't let me take something that doesn't have my name on the bottle and that my parents don't give to me. So this particular scenario is tying in peer pressure and kind of outside exposure. Our early elementary kids might be having a play date at a friend's house and you're not there. They are places without your supervision. And so helping them understand how kind of some of those outside aspects in the world could influence them, and giving them the language on how to talk about some of these things. The next one, your child chooses an outfit for school that doesn't match and will definitely attract attention. This doesn't seem like a big deal, but that social aspect is beginning to become much more important to them. And, so you can simply say you can support them and encourage that positivity. And, I love how you express your individual style and personality in your outfits. We, again, want to encourage that decision-making and reinforcing their ability to make decisions and help them understand kind of consequences of their behaviors. Not that there's likely consequences of choosing an outfit potentially, but just really helping them, even if you don't agree with them, helping them make those decisions, helping them experience those consequences. Another Alcohol one, why is it okay for adults to drink alcohol, but not kids? And this is where we talk into that why aspect. Any amount of alcohol is dangerous for a person under 21 because their brains are still developing. Alcohol or adults should only drink within their limits, similar to how we should only eat unhealthy snacks within our limits. So not only are you talking about how it's dangerous, maybe why it's dangerous with that brain development component, but then also tying in adult responsible behaviors. And, if they're seeing you engage in alcohol use or something that is legal for you, helping them understand why it's okay for adults versus kids. The last scenario for an early elementary kid, your child asks to have the password to one of their favorite apps to share with someone at school so that they can play too. And simply let them know it's important not to share your passwords because those passwords keep your iPad, computer, whatever phone safe. Giving away your password would be like giving away the key to your house. So being able to make analogies for something that they understand. And in this scenario, it's a computer password, and security aspects is, in that privacy thing, just like letting have key to your house, and helping them understand kind of why you are responding the way that you are. So with our early elementary students, again, we want to take advantage of those natural opportunities to talk. And if you think, oh, there aren't opportunities to talk about drugs or alcohol or friendship relationships or other difficult topics, oh, there absolutely are. Regularly there are. And it's really important with our early elementary students to also ask them how they feel about these things. You'll probably understand and learn a lot about what they're thinking when you kind of ask those open-ended follow-up questions. I'm gonna use another personal example in this situation, again, with my oldest daughter, to kind of demonstrate this. So she is 8 now. And just recently, I was cleaning out her backpack and I found a note that she wrote to one of her friends. So I read it, of course. And it was all about, she was writing this note to her friend, and it was all about one of her classmates who said the F word. And apparently, according to her note, he was serious about it. And, she, in her note to her friend, she didn't know what to do about it. She didn't want to tell the teacher. She didn't want anybody to tattletale, but she was definitely impacted by the fact that this classmate said the F word. And she didn't actually write out the full F word. It was literally F word. And so I'm like, oh my goodness. Need to have a conversation with her about language and how that makes her feel and, all of that stuff. And, it could have gone 2 very different ways. Had I, gone to her bedroom and said, hey, I found this note in your backpack talking about the F word. Let's talk about this. Knowing my daughter, she would have immediately shut down, immediately been not happy that I was going through her backpack and reading her things, even though she knows I clean out her backpack like every day. And it could have been a very confrontational situation, and it would probably not have gone very well, not ended in the way that I would have hoped with a productive, engaging, good conversation. So I didn't say anything that day. So and I talked to my husband about this, and the next day, she was outside on the patio. She just started reading Harry Potter. And so she's reading the first Harry Potter book, and she's out there. My husband was out there, my other kids. And all of a sudden she says to my husband, she's like, Daddy, there's a bad word in Harry Potter. And he's sitting there thinking, he's like, okay, I've read Harry Potter. What bad word is in Harry Potter? And so he starts to ask questions about, oh, what is this word? And, so they start a conversation about the word, which was stupid. In Harry Potter, and then I happen to walk outside, and so he pulls me into the conversation. And so, we had wanted to talk about language, and so here presented a perfect opportunity in a very safe, engaging way to have a conversation about language. And so we were able to talk to her about good words, bad words, kind words, unkind words, what words she know, and how do those things make her feel? She does not like bad words, which I'm so appreciative of. But those two conversations, or potential two conversations, if I confronted her versus it came up naturally, had two very different outcomes. It was a really productive, good, short conversation. And we were able to talk about our expectations for language, why language is important, curse words, etc., in a really, really nice way. So really looking for those opportunities in your kind of day-to-day life with your kids and taking advantage of topics that do come up. Other things to keep in mind with our early elementary kids, we want to make sure we're focused on the present. They don't care about things too far off in the future. It's not going to be meaningful for them. So really focusing on that short term. Again, setting those clear rules and expectations about how you want them to behave so that there's no question. And keeping in mind of the unsaid messages that you might be sending to your kids, especially as it relates to substances. I think one of the things that has become a challenge in society is, adults themselves look to alcohol or other substances, cannabis, vaping, etc., as a way to relax or to relieve stress or to have fun, even if you don't necessarily outwardly say that. But if you come home from work, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed, I just need a beer. What are those messages sending to your kids? So keeping in mind, setting those clear rules and expectations for them, but also thinking about how your own behavior as an adult, what sort of messages you're conveying to them as well. And again, back to that problem solving, working on those problem solving skills together, helping them go through that process. What is the problem? What are the different options? If they choose option A, what are the consequences? If they choose option B, what are the consequences? And really starting to be able to go through that process with them to really help them practice, build their confidence, their resiliency, etc. in those ways. So now moving on to kind of those later elementary, those fifth graders, fourth, fifth, and middle school students. I would say as a professional, this is my favorite age group. I have not reached that yet as a parent, so talk to me in a few years. But I love this stage. I love the middle school stage because there is so much going on. There's lots of words on this page, so there's absolutely a lot happening in their development. At this point, they're very much starting to learn and think about abstract concepts, those deductive reasoning skills, kind of logical thought sequencing patterns, much, much, much more complex than what we've seen in prior stages. Much better memory, those executive functioning skills, so that decision-making, impulse control, judgment, etc. They are able to kind of look at situation and formulate their thoughts and opinions based on kind of analyzing what's going on around them, as opposed to just what they're feeling or experiencing. Again, going back to those preschoolers who really respond based on their perception versus what's actually happening. At this stage, this middle school stage, kids are able to really look at situation and start to think through and analyze, as opposed to just kind of react and respond based on how they're feeling. At this point, most of their brain is really, those kind of key survival aspects are pretty much done being developed, and the focus really goes to that prefrontal cortex, that frontal lobe, all of those executive functioning skills that we've talked about. One of the key things, and this I think is an indicator of why some of those probably later middle school and then high schoolers, why they engage in some risk-taking behavior and sensation seeking. So what happens in the brain? It changes the way it processes rewards and pleasure, and it intensifies kind of the body's experience and the feelings associated with that. And so with this shift, because they experience much more intense rewards and pleasures in response to different things, that also then increases risky and sensation-seeking behaviors, kind of in this, again, late middle school into teen years. That egocentrism is still here and in full force. And now, so it's not so much that they think that everyone thinks what they think. It's now they are the most important and they are uniquely powerful. They are invincible. Again, that ties into that risky sensation-seeking behaviors because they think nothing bad's going to happen to them. So that also increases the likelihood of them engaging in some of these behaviors. And that is, definitely an important aspect of this stage. And this we also see if you have a middle schooler or have had a middle schooler, they are definitely shifting their focus and placing a much higher priority on those peer relationships and those social relationships and their friends' opinions over parents and family. This is totally healthy and natural part of their maturity and development. Not easy as a parent or an adult when this happens, but that also helps us think through the importance of our conversations in talking about peer pressure and peer influence, because they're placing such much greater priority on those things than on adults. So our goals here, really deeper discussions because they can handle them. And again, like I just said, really thinking through that peer aspect and those motivations for engaging in risky behaviors. So some scenarios that our middle school students, and I probably will only do about 2 or 3 of these just to be mindful of time. So we'll start with the first one, top left. Your child is just starting middle school and you know that it's more likely that they will now be exposed to substances at school or in the social environment. And so since at this point they're in middle school, you've had these conversations a lot before. And so reminding them, hey, I know we've talked about this, but you're at an age now when you might be seeing or hearing about other kids engaging in these different substances. I want you to remember that our family does not allow any substance use because it's bad for your health and your brain. I'm here for you, and the best thing you can do is talk to me if you're confused or concerned. So you're tying in lots of different layers in that why it's bad, talking about the influence of their peers, letting them know you are a trusted resource, your clear expectations for them. The other one that we can do, all right, your child asks if they can have a sleepover at a friend's house Friday night. However, they have a big soccer game Saturday morning. So you could easily just say, no, you're not going to sleepover. However, we want to make sure we're taking advantage of these opportunities for them to practice those problem solving and decision-making skills. So use this as an opportunity to work through that process together. So you could say, let's think about this together. If you go to the sleepover, will you have enough energy for the game tomorrow? If you stay at home and miss the sleepover, how might that make you feel? Are there other options? So while ultimately you as a parent may have the end say of no, you're not going to a sleepover because you have a soccer game, it is really important to help them understand and go through the process of solving this problem for them. Pros and cons, different options, and really help them be part of that process, because there will be plenty of times where they're at school, at a friend's house, out in the world, and they face a problem, and knowing kind of how they process and work through those problem solving skills and letting them practice that so that, you'll be able to trust them and, know that they'll make good decisions later. But anytime you can practice that, is a really good thing. Yes, it's easy just to say no, end of conversation, but this is going to help them much longer or much more in the long run. And so just some overall tips. And again, hopefully you're starting to see some repetition in these tips. Again, making sure your child knows the rules and the consequences and actually enforcing those consequences. Research shows over and over and over again, parents that have clear rules regarding substance use and other risk-taking behavior, their kids are less likely to engage in use. It is not a guarantee, but those kids are less likely to engage in those behaviors when they know very clearly how their parents feel about them. there's a lot happening right now with middle schoolers and puberty. And so we want to make sure that we are kind of using a strengths-based approach and really supporting all of their strengths, their individuality, focusing on that kind of effort, creativity, kindness, rather than those specific outcomes. And again, nurturing all of those really positive skills that they're going to need to continue to have as they go through high school. One big aspect, I think, especially at this stage, is to really get to know their friends and their friends' parents, because now they're off in the world at friends' houses, etc. They know your rules, but it's important for you to also know their friends' parents' rules, whether that's related to social media, substances, movies that they watch, language, all of those things, knowing how their friends' parents feel about those as well. When your kiddos aren't with you. And then lastly, helping them understand the difference between reality and fantasy. Again, using TV shows, movies, books, whatever, to have these conversations, and really bringing in, how is social media, how is advertising, how are all of these kind of media influences impacting their decisions and opinions on different topics. High school, super fun. Lots happening in high school too. Definitely much more independent. They're questioning authority. They're thinking through things and their own personal choices. They are better able to kind of link their current behaviors to future consequences, whether that's college or a job or whatever's in the future, making their own plans. They're really able to see kind of a higher ethical moral standards, et cetera. Definitely much more complex conversations that you can have with them. So kind of when we're thinking about our conversations that we're having with our high schoolers, really developing those strategies and reinforcing those strategies that they may already have to use in social situations when they're not sure what to do. Maybe they're at a party and there's alcohol and they want to, say no, really working through all of those scenarios with them so that they can navigate their way through those situations. And again, clear conversations about why you don't want them to use, what the risks are, how it can impact them. One of the things we consistently hear from our high school students as it specifically relates to substances is high school students choose not to use because they want to be in control of their bodies. And so knowing and understanding why they don't engage in substance use or other risk-taking behavior is really important conversation to have as well, and ways that you can support them in that. So, two situations here. The person in your teen was supposed to come home from a party, was drinking, or maybe using cannabis, whatever. Talking with them about what to do in that situation, coming up, we call it the X plan. There's a lot of different ways for it, but coming up with some sort of code word so that they can communicate with you that they're feeling uncomfortable, they need to be picked up. Once you hear that code word, that secret word, whatever, you'll be there, no questions asked. It's giving them a safe out for being in an uncomfortable situation, which is really important. We'll do the bottom left one as well. Your teen has started hanging out with kids you don't know and dropped their old friends. Letting them know, hey, I notice you're hanging out with a different crowd. Is something going on? Is there a problem? Or are you just branching out, meeting new kids? Tell me about them. Invite them over for dinner. I'd really like to meet them. So it's acknowledging that you've noticed a change and then making sure that they know that you want to get to know their friends, and that their friends are important to you too. Lots of these are kind of repeats, but just enhanced from previous things. Again, setting clear rules and consequences, using natural opportunities to talk about these things, show interest, and discuss just other things in your kid's life. Them being able to trust you because you're involved and interested and engaged in their life is really, really important. And lastly, our young adults. So these are our 18 to 25-year-olds. Their brains are just about fully developed. They're figuring out how to be an adult, whether it's college or career, they're going out in the world, living on their own. which was really exciting. And they're really starting to broaden, or have started to broaden, kind of their views globally: justice, equity, idealism versus reality. Again, becoming an adult. Definitely, hopefully they can have some good debates and conversations with you about different topics. And just because they're technically an adult does not mean that you're not still their parent and can't still share your opinion about what they may or may not be doing. And so in this particular stage of life, you want to talk about and encourage them to think through their decisions to make sure that they're staying safe. Whether they're 21 now and they are engaging in substance use, talking about how to be safe with what it is that they're doing, and making sure that they're still being healthy and you're still supporting their independence. So really, really quickly, we'll do the bottom right. How do you make sure you and your friends stay safe when you go out? You're not judging them. You're not saying you shouldn't go out. You're not questioning, sorry, what they're doing. Oh my. So some tips on here that you can give or share or talk about: making sure that your young adult has a plan to stick with their friends. Don't leave someone stranded. Never stay somewhere that makes you feel uncomfortable, pressured, figuring out an Uber, whatever, trusting your instincts, just helping have these conversations. Even though they are an adult and in theory they can take care of themselves, you are still their parent, you still care about them, and you still want them to be happy and healthy. And so keeping that line of communication open with your child, even as they leave home, making sure that you can be a trusted resource when problems or difficult situations arise, that they can always come talk to you. Staying alert to mental health issues, and we should probably have this for high schoolers as well, but really looking out, especially as they're becoming adults, experiencing different stressors, making sure that you're aware of potential mental health issues and some, red flags or signs that they might be experiencing: stress, anxiety, depression, etc. And if they're on a college campus, knowing what resources they are available, or just what community resources that there are. And just reminding yourself that you do still matter in their life, and that you are still their parent and you still care about them. So key takeaways: stop talking and listen. They have a lot to say if you just provide the space for them to say it at all of these ages. Again, finding those opportunities for real conversation, approaching those conversations with openness and open mind and open-ended questions. Are you okay versus how are you feeling is going to lead to a different conversation. Offering that consistent empathy and support, being authentic and acknowledge that things can be hard. Just all of these things keeping in mind as you support your kid in whichever way. Definitely, you can go to gncy.org for any more information. We have lots of other info resources, more how-to guides on different topics. So if you want more information, feel free to check that out. And that is it. I have 3 minutes for questions, which is actually pretty good for me. So.
Awesome. If there's any questions, we can do that now for Erin. I enjoyed that. And I liked all the different cases that you had for the different ages, because that kind of gave a better understanding of how to work with different generations too. So if there's any questions, we might have lost ours. We can go ahead and close out. And then if any questions, you can email them to me, and then I can get them to Erin as well. Thank you for the talk today. We really appreciated it. And thank you to Glenview and Northbrook Coalition for Youth. The YMCA is free. The YMCA Education Series is free and open to the public. We encourage you to tell your friends and family about us and check us out online at nsymca.org. Thank you again today to Erin for speaking to us about prevention across the ages. Join us for our next talk, which will be tomorrow at 11 a.m. It's about scams. Be alert and be aware. With that, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.